It's a sure thing. Change, change. Expect a miracle change. Watch me change when you change the way you look at things. The things you look at change. When you change the way you look at things, the things you look at change. When you change the way you look at things, the things you look at change. When you change the way you look at things, the things you look at change. Now do 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 change. Do 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 change. Do 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 change. Do 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 do.
Good afternoon and welcome to Spirit Cafe. I'm Barbara,
And I'm Cheryl.
and we are here to have courageous conversations about whatever happens to be on our mind at any given moment. So let us begin with our land acknowledgement. We work, live, and play on the historical and traditional territory of many First Nations. And as we gather on Turtle Island, we as settlers are grateful for the opportunity to meet here. And we thank all the generations of people who have taken care of this land for thousands of years. We include the Métis, Inuit, and all other Indigenous people. And also acknowledging that as we continue to grow and expand on these lands, there is still unresolved and dangerous inequality and discrimination toward our BIPOC and 2S LGBTQ plus family. So, by making these acknowledgements, we strive to be allies and take an active part in reconciliation. We recognize our oneness, we realize our history, and we choose to create a new reality, for we are one. Well, Miss Cheryl, we just came through a long weekend. Canada Day, woohoo! 4th of July, woohoo!
Very interesting times, Independence Day. Yeah, and what that means for different people, right? Different peoples of the land.
Well, this is it. I was saying to you earlier today that the last 2 years, I've had great difficulty celebrating Canada Day. Now, I'm very proud to be Canadian. I love this country. I've spent my whole life here, and I am thrilled to be a Canadian. And it breaks my heart to look at what we've done historically with our Indigenous people.
Yeah.
And so I find that when, July 1st rolls around, I'm feeling a little mixed. I didn't hang the Canadian flag this year, and I didn't hang it last year. So as a person who's immigrated to the country, how do you feel?
So it was on my mind actually quite a bit, because it feels like it's bittersweet for me, knowing the history more now, of how we got here today, to be able to call it Canada and Canada Day, but also as an immigrant, so grateful that this country accepted me and that to make this my new home. So I also love Canada and appreciate Canada and everything about it. And I recognize that there's no country on earth that does not have its history of conflict and, just even in Europe, you think about fighting for the land, right? Always wanting more territory, more. Now what's going on with Ukraine and Russia wanting, more land, take back what they think is theirs. But the genocide that took place and the way the Indigenous were treated, both in America, and here in Canada, I think about South Africa. I think everywhere, wherever people were going in and colonizing countries, there's been great damage.
Yeah, there has been. And that's the part for me that that I'm challenged by, because I see that um, even today, the racism toward our First People is rampant still. And there are, reserves that don't have adequate water or the ability to even sustain the very basic needs of life. And I look at that and go, we could do better. Like
Mm-hmm.
we're a prosperous country. We're
Mm-hmm.
considered nice.
Mm-hmm.
Not sure what
On the
nice means.
surface, yeah.
Yeah, it's a four-letter word because I don't really. It's one of those four-letter words we shouldn't be using. But I think of it that way because I think that niceness is a way of wearing a mask that suggests, yeah, I like that background, Deja. That's great. Um,
Mm-hmm.
that
That's beautiful.
idea, yeah, that idea of, I can just sort of hide my real feelings in the back and I can put on a little smile and a happy face and pretend that I accept the various people who have immigrated to our country, but also the people who were here first. And I think, when I think about, I said on the Joy Show once, I said, imagine for a moment somebody comes in your house, grabs your children and takes them away and you don't see them again, and takes your house away and puts you on a plot of land somewhere where you don't
Oh,
necessarily know anybody,
yeah.
and tells you you just need to be okay with that.
Mm-mm.
And I think about somebody doing that today, I would be outraged.
I would be broken, quite honestly.
Yes,
I would be
that's what
broken.
it is.
Yeah,
I
for
think we
sure.
broke
We
our
broke people.
indigenous people,
Yeah, we did. We broke their families. We broke their spirit. We
their
broke their
language, their
language,
culture, their
identity.
spirituality.
Yeah. One of the things, though, that I do feel proud about is that we are in a time where, there have been the reconciliation processes and acknowledgements and taking things more seriously. Like, I do believe that we are in a time of change.
Yes, I
Um,
agree.
so thank goodness for that, that we're moving forward, and that, I see many indigenous groups starting to celebrate their cultures more openly, and the young starting to have an interest in learning their languages again and their cultures, and things like that. And I think that only brings a richness to the world.
Yes.
So again, moving forward in a positive way. I think about us as a humanity as being, we are really just toddlers right now.
We are. Yeah.
So honestly, so back then we couldn't even crawl. We didn't know, we didn't even know what our features were, what to call the nose and the mouth and the eyes, right? And so we did. I mean, look at how people went to war, even at the beginning of the last century, on before that, facing each other and marching towards each other, knowing that if you're in the front, you're probably going to die. And then the
Yeah.
next row, and the next row, and the next row. Who
It's
in their
madness.
right
It's
mind,
madness.
right? And
Yeah.
then suddenly we started with weapons, and we think that we progressed. We, even in today's day and age with technology, we think we're progressing. And then I hear about AI and all the potential dangers, and I'm like, oh my goodness, we have no idea what we're doing.
Well, I think that's one of the biggest challenges. I think as human beings, we tend to like to think we know everything. And the older I get, the less I know. That's what I'm
Yeah.
coming clear about, is there's so much to learn, there's so much to discover. What's interesting to me is, if we take a look at the various indigenous people in Canada and the US, for example, and we look at their culture, the way they were before we came, where they hunt to eat, not to fill a grocery store, not to fill thousands of grocery stores, but they killed animals so that they could eat, that they could use
The,
the skins for
yeah,
their clothing,
their
pelts for
housing,
wool.
their warmth, yeah,
Yeah,
absolutely.
they worked with the land and, blessed the whole process of life and how it evolves. To me, I think that's a little smarter than what we've been doing. And the
Mhm,
beginning of COVID really illustrated that.
mhm,
When we were taken out of the equation, wildlife flourished, plant life flourished,
mhm.
the air was cleaner.
Yeah,
Like it's a
yeah.
pretty interesting equation when you think about it.
Absolutely. I think, we think we were, and when I say we, right, we're talking about the white privileged, Caucasian, Western civilizations,
Yeah.
um, think we're so advanced. And I actually think the cultures that were living that way, and hopefully still are in some places, they're the ones that are more advanced, and they're the ones that are going to survive whatever happens in this world. We have no idea where things are going with you know climate change, and I think climate change, that's a whole nother subject, but I think that it's part of the
Yes,
natural
it is.
cycle.
It is.
So we can do all we want to try and stop it and maybe slow it down. But if you look at millions and millions of years, how things were created, mountains and rivers and canyons and caves, and the earth has gone through many, many changes
Yeah.
that we have no idea about. So again, that's a whole nother story. Um, but there are so many things that are changing in our lifetimes, which weren't changing as much in our parents and grandparents and great grandparents. There was change. I'm not saying there wasn't. There were wars that they went through. There was the Industrial Revolution. There were things like that. But I feel
Change
like
has sped up.
it has sped up, and it's on another level
Yeah.
that it's happening right now.
And it seems to be, when I look at the way we live, there's a lot of greed,
Mhm.
a lot of competition. And I think these are the things that keep us on this treadmill.
Yeah.
I was speaking to someone earlier today and they were talking about just how exhausted they are
Mhm.
because life is just so busy and doing so much and needing a break. And it's like, how do we get that break if we're constantly in competition with everybody else? If we're striving to arrive at something, but what if there's no place to arrive to? What if the journey we're on is simply that, a journey of expression, and whatever we do, however we do it, is going to not necessarily take us anywhere, right? But
Yeah.
allows us to experience the moment in whatever way we do. And I think if we look at that more closely and go, I'm on a journey that does not have a destination.
Yeah.
So if I'm on a journey, what am I doing now?
Yeah.
Because now is really the only true time. This is the
Mhm.
only moment that exists, is right
Mhm.
now.
Mhm.
And then what I do now, of course, will impact what comes next.
Exactly. But what I really value about this COVID period
Mhm.
is how I think that many of us have reevaluated things, have reevaluated our lives. People have changed careers.
Yes.
People have retired,
Mhm.
deciding, why wait? Might as well do it now.
Yeah.
Um, I notice, I don't know about where you are, but here, every single like thing used to be open almost every day, except maybe for Christmas or something. Now it's
Yeah.
not like that anymore. Now there are shops that close on Sunday, that aren't open in the evening, things like that. And
Yeah.
it gets frustrating sometimes when you're expecting something, but then I think about it and I think that's not a bad thing, because it
Yeah.
means that we're slowing down a little. which is, I think, important to do. You
I
know,
think
we
so
become
too.
cogs in a wheel, that just keeps turning. You work in these big corporations, you're a number, you're a nobody. They don't
Yeah.
care about you as a person, so
No,
if you
because they can replace you that fast, right?
really,
Yeah.
even with the labor shortage right now, because of people doing what works for them, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
But I do think that that I think that's a good thing. I don't think that's a bad thing.
Yeah, I agree. I think that, slowing down is a really important part. And I mean, in our teachings, one of the things we teach is meditation and breathing. It's like we breathe so shallow and we're so busy on this treadmill trying to do what? Get more, get more, get more, get more. What if we just stopped that altogether and decided that I have enough?
Hmm.
There is no more that I need to get. Like my quality of life is not improved because I bought one more thing. Maybe my quality of life is improved if I give up a lot of what I have so that I have more time to simply breathe.
And what if
And
we learned that at a younger age?
oh, wouldn't that be awesome?
Right? Because we reach an age, most of the people I speak to in my age group, we're decluttering, we're getting rid of stuff. We don't want to buy things, they're dust collectors. But I
Yeah.
know when I was younger, I never thought of things like that. It was like, what? Are you crazy? Like, old people are just, buying a new car, I remember my late stepfather, why do you buy a new car? Like, you don't need a new car yet. This car's been going for so many hundreds of thousands of kilometers and it's still good.
It's
And it's true. We didn't need it, right? It's not a need, it's a want.
it's a
Um,
want.
and really we don't need all this stuff
Yeah.
that we have in our lives.
And what I notice is that I remember when a really dear friend of mine passed away. She died young at 52. And when we went into her home, just sitting amongst her stuff, going like, she's not here anymore. And her family, her sister, who they were not on the best terms, basically just took everything in the house and threw it in a bin
Yeah,
and just garbaged it all. So when I was there, I said, this painting she had done in her 20s, I said, could I have that? She goes, take whatever you want. We don't want any of it. All they wanted was the car and the house because those
absolutely.
they could sell for
Yeah,
cash.
yeah.
And it was so heartbreaking for someone that I cared so deeply about,
Mhm,
whose birth family did
mhm,
not care at all.
mhm,
And that was a little hard to imagine
mhm,
that. And this woman was well loved by everybody around her,
mhm,
and her family just didn't care,
mhm.
which is just
Yeah, it's heartbreaking.
mind-boggling to me, right?
It's interesting how I don't know, a parent is seen so differently by their children as to how other people see their parents as people,
Yes,
right?
it's
Uh,
true.
it's really it amazes me because I often think, that sometimes they have a perception of us that is so not who we are. But that's their
Yes,
perception, right?
yeah,
Because of
it's
the
really
history,
true.
the whole life that they've grown up, seeing and knowing and believing. And there's nothing you can change that. Talking about your friend and her kids throwing everything out. I keep certain things, and I think, as a keepsake, as a memory, or as a, thinking that, maybe one day they'll look at that and appreciate it. They probably won't even see it. They'll probably throw it out before they wouldn't even look through anything.
Yeah, I don't know. It wasn't her children. She actually never had children, but it was
Okay.
her sister
Mm,
who treated her stuff so badly. And I don't know. Like I know that as kids, well, this as a mom, the way you feel about your children is way different than the way they feel about you.
mhm.
That's one
Absolutely.
of the hardest things to kind of wrap our head around.
Hmm.
But, I said to my eldest daughter when her first child was about 2 and starting to separate, right? Don't want you, right? And she called me in tears, and I was like, "Well, I want you to think about something for a minute. I want
Hmm.
you to think about how much you love me,
Hmm.
and I want you to think about how much you love your child.
Hmm.
Is there a discrepancy there? Is there something different?"
Hmm.
And it's like, yeah." I said, "There you
Hmm.
go."
Hmm.
I said, "That's all it is. She
Hmm.
loves you, and she's starting to find her space." So I think sometimes, when we look at what happened with the indigenous people here, taking children away, I can't imagine
No.
the incredible pain those women went through as mothers to
The
lose your
families, right? The women, the men, the grandparents, the
yeah,
village. I mean, they really,
the whole
truly were
everything,
a community. If you have a look at the medicine wheel and you look at
the
places on that,
balance of
the
life.
balance of life.
Mhm.
Exactly. I remember going to a talk many years ago about that, and how the grandparents would mentor the youth, and the older kids would look after the children, the babies, and just that it was actually set up in a way that each person in the community, in the family, had a role to play, you
Yeah.
know and that was all destabilized and deconstructed,
Mhm.
which is very, very sad.
And you don't see like in Canada and the US with, our typical white families, you don't see generational families in one household.
No, not
In
anymore.
in fact, many many people I know would look at it and go, "Are you kidding me?" Like, "Oh, I couldn't stand to live with my parents or my
Mhm.
grandparents." And so it's a very different thing, a different
Mhm.
way that we live.
Mhm.
And I wonder what would happen if we began to shift that so that we could honor all the generations and begin to live together in a way that um, just in a way that really supports every level. Because when you think about what our parents know compared to
Mhm.
what we know, and what value, given that they would be at a point where they wouldn't be working, they'd be retired, the amount of care and time they could spend with the children, right?
Mhm.
Like somebody once said, I don't know if it was Neil Donald Walsh or somebody anyway, talked about how, really young people have children, but it should be the grandparents who raise them
Mhm.
because they have more time and,
Mhm.
more
They have
understanding.
yeah, more understanding, more wisdom, more patience, all those things that really would benefit our children so much
Mhm.
more than us as young parents, including me and you. Like you said, your fourth one you got right, fourth one lucky. But uh, most
I'm
of us,
working on that one.
we made all the mistakes that we didn't want to, that we saw others doing, that we thought we'd avoid. And now, a lot of our kids are doing the same thing.
Yeah. I
um,
think that's what happens is,
mhm,
I listen to people when they're, expecting their first child and it's like, "Whoa, I'm going to be great at this." I'm not going to do what you did or you did. I mean, they'll even look at their friends and go, "Oh man, I can't believe you're doing that." And until the child arrives and they start to realize the complexity of parenting.
mhm,
What I love about the indigenous way of living, the way everybody's included, is
mhm.
children really are viewed as people as well, where we tend to view them as possessions.
Right. Children are valued, youth are valued, and grandparents, the
Parents are
elderly, are valued. They're not
yes,
just put out to pasture in an old home or something, right?
yeah,
They're
no,
valued, they're
they're valued.
appreciated, they're respected. Here we become, I feel like, our kids find us to be a burden a lot of the time.
Yeah, and I think that's something we could learn.
Mhm.
if we didn't think we knew it all.
Hmm. Absolutely.
Yeah, I think
Exactly.
there's some work to do for sure as we look at the idea of being allies or reconciling some of what's happened. I think there's a lot about our own intrinsic thinking that requires a shift.
Yeah.
That, as we begin to uh, reframe what we believe is the right way, and
Hmm.
instead note that there's 8 billion people on the planet, so there's 8 billion ways of being.
Yeah.
And to take the time to get to know each other so we understand the
Hmm.
differences
Hmm.
and the different needs,
Right. Yeah.
because we all need something different.
And I think we can learn a lot from different cultures,
Yeah,
different indigenous people as well as cultures. There's so much richness in different cultures,
absolutely.
that also is getting lost through the generations.
Mhm.
Um, so we could certainly learn a lot. And I really think that as much as we're advancing, sometimes going back to some basics would do us good.
I agree. I agree. I think I think there's a way of sort of reverting to a more natural lifestyle. I was
Mhm.
listening to a podcast yesterday, and the doctor who was on the show was talking about how there is so much grass, right? Like we water it and we've got these beautiful lawns and stuff. But what if we were growing fruits and vegetables on that land?
Mhm.
If we were growing fruits and vegetables on that land, each one of us would be self-sustaining.
Absolutely.
And that would make a huge difference uh, in our world, right? Like,
Yeah.
so, I mean, you sit back and you go, but that's a lot of work. But is it any more work than if we have to go to the grocery store and line up to get food and maybe we can't get what we want? And, you know, we,
Yeah.
and how
And
much we waste.
we've seen that, where the
Yeah.
shelves are empty.
Yeah.
And now there's a strike going on in BC at the container depot, which is also going to impact the whole country because a lot of things come in via that harbor, especially from out east, from Asia.
Yeah.
And so that's going to impact prices. It's going to impact what's accessible and available. It's going to have a
Yeah.
huge impact. Now, in
So,
Guelph, Barbara, when I worked in Guelph a few years ago,
yeah.
there were people actually doing that. They were taking out their front lawns and they were
Mhm.
growing vegetables.
Yeah.
And I was like, to me, that is smart. That
Well,
is
it
smart.
is. Yeah. The soil contains everything we need.
Yeah.
And we've destroyed it,
Mhm.
so it no longer serves the purpose it should. I have a neighbor who his whole backyard, he grows corn, he grows potatoes, he grows bitter melon, like you name it, he's growing it. And then in his front yard, he's got a
Mhm.
little bit of grass, a little bit of flowers, but he's also got, you know, kale and all kinds of stuff growing there as well. And I walk by his yard and it's like so beautiful to see how full of food it is. His
Mhm.
family will be fine no matter
Mhm.
what because his yard is his garden.
Yeah.
Well, we're going to take a little commercial break here. And when we come back, we'll just keep chatting about whatever comes to mind. And don't
Already.
go away. This is Spirit Cafe, and we'll be back in just a minute.
Hi, everybody. My name is Ricky Byers. And what I want you to know is that on the weekend of July 14th, that's July 14th, 15th, and 16th, I'm going to be blowing up Salt Lake City. This is my debut there. I've never been there before. So, Reverend Cindy, look out. We're going to burn it up, baby. God bless. Peace.
Ricky Byers. Oh my goodness. I love her music so much. In the land of I am. It's so good. It's so good. I was just looking something up because, we look at, what happened when we went into lockdown and everything began to flourish. Well, one of the interesting stories that I'd read about a number of years ago was how at Yellowstone National Park they had taken the wolves out of the park and it destroyed the whole ecosystem.
Yes.
And by introducing a small number, I don't know, it was 5 or 7 wolves back into that system, they brought it back to balance and it changed the rivers, it changed the whole landscape, and it saved Yellowstone. I think, the message to me in that story is that balance is what creates a greater sense of harmony and possibility. And so when we look at the way we govern, the way we use products, the
Yeah.
way, I mean, many people don't know their neighbors. They might live next door to people for 10 years and not know their first names.
Well,
And
and
I
that's
think
no, sorry, I interrupted you.
Yeah, I think it's just something that we should just kind of unpack the way that we separate and find a way to move together and to create a sense of possibility and community. I think it's time for us to start speaking to one another, to stop competing and start collaborating. You and I do that. I think there's more and more people in places where that could be done.
Hmm. Yeah, I agree. And that's that's what the indigenous did. That's how they lived, right? They lived in balance. They understood, the balance that needed to be, not just in the wild, but in their community, in their families,
In their family.
and the same with African cultures, and I'm sure other cultures that lived, that true to who they were. They knew all that, and we came in and created the imbalance that we are experiencing right now.
We
And
do love imbalance.
oh my gosh, yeah, the perfection of imbalance.
Yeah.
But again, I think it's a I want to say cosmic, but not so much cosmic, but it's a societal lesson. It's a humanity lesson. It's part of our evolution and our growth and our change. Because just like everything that we see in our own lives, we create by how we perceive things and how we
Yeah.
respond to things. So do we do that as a community, as a society, and as a humanity. So it's got to start, as we know, here, and it's got to ripple out into the world. And that will take some time. But I really believe that if we don't wake up and we don't address her needs, the earth's needs, she will
Yes.
take care of herself. And
Absolutely. Oh, absolutely. We'll be kicked off.
oh, absolutely. She'll take care of
Evicted.
herself and do what's needed to do to restore balance.
Well, that's one of the things that happens very quickly with Mother Earth, as we saw in COVID, take people out and boom, back in balance in a minute. And I
Mhm.
think if we could look at the value of that, like notice it for what it really was, it was an opportunity for us to really learn a very valuable lesson
Mhm.
that balance is the key to our prosperity. And by prosperity, I mean living a full and wondrous life to the
Mhm.
best of our personal ability within the framework of the collective, because we can't separate from it. We're
No.
all connected.
Yeah.
Like, I know all of my neighbors. Do you know all of your neighbors? The
Um,
people beside you and across the street from you or whatever?
yes,
Yeah.
but no further than that.
Okay, well, we'll work on that. I know a few people up and down the street and around the block because I chat with everybody. But when I moved in here, the first thing I did, actually, before I even moved in, when I first looked at the house, was I talked to the neighbors on either side. And then the day I moved in, the guy across the street, he was trying to pull into his parking space across from me, and I was trying to pull into mine. And we were kind of like, what?
Bumping into each other.
What's going on here, right? And so we had a good chuckle and a laugh. But I think I think we start where we are, and we start within ourselves to go, number one, I'm safe. It's safe to be me.
Mhm.
And I'm going to honor my intuition. It will let me know if I'm not safe.
Mhm.
And I'm going to get to know the people around me. There's great value in that. My neighbors on either side have had health issues recently. And so between us and the person across the street, we take out their garbage bins, return them.
Yeah.
We, make sure that their uh, walkways are cleaned of snow, and we do whatever we can, the little bit that we can, to make sure that they're okay. And we
Mhm.
check in on them,
Mhm.
take them food, do whatever, but an opportunity to kind of get to know them and to make sure they're okay.
Yeah.
Uh, Living as a community. I'm not looking forward to moving from this neighborhood, actually.
Mhm.
It'll be,
Yeah.
but I'll meet a whole bunch of more people, bunch of new
Yeah.
people. Um, but
Yeah.
I think we have to explore individually why it is that we resist, why we'd rather be right than happy.
Mhm. Yeah, and I was thinking we're talking about Independence Day in Canada, in the US. Probably every country has their own Independence Day,
Mhm.
um, and I think about us as human beings. How we value our independence,
Yeah.
um, and I also think that we have disconnected from ourselves, from each other, from family, from community, and so there's that work that needs to be done there again. The price of independence, and having things your way, my way. Right, and not wanting to live with anybody else, so that I don't have to answer to anybody else except my husband, and I don't answer to him either. So
And the truth is coming out in the show.
but that's what we've done.
Mhm.
We've just moved further and further away from ourselves and from each other, and so we really need to start reconnecting, with ourselves, with each other, with
Yeah.
family, with friends, and valuing. I think it's got so much to do with our value system.
Yeah.
And the northwestern, or not north, but the western way of thinking,
Mhm.
um, is has changed the values that
It
were
has.
so beautiful back in the day.
Yeah.
Whenever that was different for everyone.
Yeah.
But I
Yeah.
think we all know what we're talking about, right? We've valued things like that. We've valued, um, doing things for others. There was just such a different value system, and then it became just needing to look after me, look after myself, and
Do you
survive.
think, yeah, do you think that comes from our fear of being seen for who we really are? Like, people don't have to get to know me if I live in my little world, and I exclude everything and everyone. Like, I get to hide.
Mhm.
right? If
Yeah,
there's
but
stuff,
why? Why do I feel I need to hide?
shame, guilt, yeah, there's a lot of
Exactly,
stuff. There's
right?
a lot of stuff we need to heal.
Yeah. So, and that's because
Yeah,
of the value system of the day,
absolutely.
of the time, and I
Yeah,
think something that we don't talk about much as a society is everything, every rule, every law, everything that we live to is man-made.
white man made for
White
what we live
man
to.
made, yes, right? So all the laws, all the rules and
Yeah,
regulations and
yeah.
everything, it has been created by man. Our jobs, our
The way education system.
economy, right? Our
Yeah,
finance system,
yeah,
everything has been
everything.
created by man.
And it's been created to serve white men first.
And I would say the 1%, I would add.
Yeah, I think that 1% gets served probably the most if they're white.
But they
The
are, we know
1%
that.
that
We know that.
no, but I mean, when you look at when you look at people of wealth, I mean, there's people of color who are very wealthy, but I think that white privilege is so strong, and it's something that we need to. I think we have to explore within ourselves why we believe we have more rights than somebody else. And
Mhm.
I think it's some of the stuff we do just organically, like we don't even think about it,
Mhm.
is because we've been raised with
Mhm.
this privilege, and so we take it for granted and we don't notice
Mhm.
what's happening to other cultures.
Mhm.
I remember driving one of my daughter's friends home one day after a visit, and she's Muslim Somali, and we're driving along, and she just said, she is discriminated against all the time. It's
Mhm.
so normal. She doesn't
Mhm.
even think it's a bad thing.
Mhm.
Like she goes,
Mhm.
it just is what it is. I'm thinking, I said, it's horrible. It should never happen. She goes, it happens all the time.
Mhm.
That's in Toronto, Canada, which happens to be a very diverse city.
Mhm.
And that makes me pretty sad.
Yeah. And racism is learned. It's not
Yes,
a
it is.
natural thing. It's a thing that is learned. It is taught.
It is.
Even if we don't teach it consciously, it is
Yes.
taught by who we are and how we be around our children and around other people.
Yeah, because our
Um,
children aren't necessarily hearing the words we speak. They're
mhm.
watching the way we
Mhm.
live
Exactly.
and then learning from
Yeah.
that. So, yeah,
Exactly. Yeah.
it's, oh my goodness, what are we going to do?
Mhm. Mhm.
I was
Well,
talking to somebody earlier today going, what do we do? What do we do?
yeah.
How do we make systemic change?
Well, it's interesting, and you know, I'm glad that my kids, they have friends of different colors, different nations, um, and that was never a thing that I made any comment on or made any deal of either way. I just wanted them to be friends with who they were friends with. And I
Exactly.
see, my grandchildren, they live in a very diverse neighborhood. They go
Yeah.
to school with many immigrants that have moved into the neighborhood. And that's a good thing.
Yeah, I
Where
agree.
the challenge is they are now growing up with these kids naturally, but we are still talking about race and difference and all this, which they will now hear about and then think, oh, is there something different about them that I should
Yeah.
be aware of?
Yeah. The
It's not
truth
a
is,
conscious thing. it's
yeah.
it's I'm just trying to say, if
Yeah,
we,
it's true.
yeah, we keep sort of
Yeah.
doing this,
Yeah.
we aren't ever going to grow out of it.
Yeah.
So at some point, we have to really just integrate it all and be okay with that so that
Yeah.
our next generation can grow as
And
if
be okay.
everything is normal not how we were.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think that's, I think we're seeing an evolution of that,
Mhm,
especially in areas that do have a very diverse population. My
mhm,
daughter went to a French public school, and of course, that was definitely maybe 50% white. It
mhm,
was definitely a much more diverse school experience than many of her friends.
mhm,
But I think too that, when we look at our kind of natural bias, it's we have to honor that when we see it. And I think that's what sometimes happens, that we don't even notice for ourselves because
mhm,
we're so accustomed to things being certain way, like little white lies. Well, what's a big lie? A big black lie? Like,
mhm,
somebody brought that to my attention one day, and I went, wow, I never even thought about, where some of these phrases come from that we
mhm,
use, and the way we do things, when we look at, you know, even looking at the old Westerns, right?
mhm,
The good guy wore the white, the bad guy wore black. So there's this very insidious little message there,
mhm,
white is right. And I
mhm,
think that's where we've got to make some really big changes, is to start really looking at all the little tiny subtle areas that we fall into.
mhm.
We're striving to be allies, and yet we're still falling into that storyline. And
Yeah.
changing that probably isn't going to happen overnight, but I love having conversations like this, because at least we can think about, what do we think about Canada Day? What do we think about Independence Day in the US? Is it independence for everybody?
And how do they feel about when I say they, I mean they were discriminated against, they were hurt, they were broken, and I think there's still so much mending to do. So for many, many people, this is not a day to celebrate.
Right.
Right? For them, it's like it probably rehashes a lot of the past that is hurtful, that is traumatic. Um,
And there's some people who've just gone along with the white way, and don't
mhm,
even question
mhm,
what, their own set of beliefs. I think that's where we have to do a deep dive in ourselves and really explore. Like, if we're walking down the street and we see a group of teenagers, do we feel safe walking into and past that group, or do we cross the street because we're not sure, right? When we look at areas where
or
there's more
is that
poverty,
real? Is that real? Right? Or are we sending a message?
we're
Sorry.
sending a message for
Yeah.
sure. Poverty, we you look at a neighborhood that has, a lower income than another neighborhood, and we call that a bad neighborhood.
Mm-hmm,
Well, is it? Not really.
mm-hmm,
It has a different economic picture, yes. But if
mm-hmm,
you go in and sit down and chat with the people, you find there's people there. Like, this whole idea of race is not even real, because there is only one, and that's the human race.
mm-hmm,
And we've lost sight of that somehow. And so we separate in ways, we separate men from women, boys from girls, like we can do that anymore. And then we separate, the wealthy from the poor, and we separate, based on our country of origin, and we just keep finding ways to separate. And I think it's time for us to stop that
mm-hmm,
and try to learn about each other,
mm-hmm,
right? To
mm-hmm,
figure out, like, I heard a while ago about this thing called um, the um, the human library, where you just hear somebody's story. And you and I had an opportunity to kind of experience that when we were in Vancouver a couple of years ago. And I think when we hear people's stories, it's so rich.
mm-hmm.
We
Yeah,
heard stuff that went, are you kidding me? Like, I
yeah.
mean, I heard stuff about your life that blew me away, you know?
And
I
that was the tip of the iceberg.
I know, I know. I'll keep chatting with you forever to try and get it all. But, we look at that and we go, what we could learn
Yeah.
if we
And the
just
same
sat
with
down and
you.
listened.
5 marriages, like, wow. How much wisdom is packed in that?
I'm not sure if it's wisdom, but fifth time's a charm, my husband would say. We've got, we're at 21 years and we're very, very happy with each other. And so I look at that, you know, 5 marriages. Well, a girlfriend of mine once said that, well, it's because you believe in love. And so you just keep trying to get there. And I thought if I'd loved myself enough, I
Yeah,
probably would have found the right one in the
yeah,
beginning. But I had my own self loathing.
yeah.
And I think that self loathing is
Mhm,
the thing that causes us to separate. We don't want
mhm,
people to know because if
mhm,
we don't love us, if we don't like us, well, obviously no one else will either. And
mhm,
so we try to hide that and just put on
mhm.
this
Yeah, and
nice face. Yeah.
exactly. And I think what you were trying to say is that we each have such rich stories,
Yeah,
and
we
we
do.
don't talk to each other.
Yeah.
We very little, very few times do we give people the time of day to really get to know them on a deeper level.
Yeah.
Um, mhm,
Like
yeah.
that's what's fun about life.
Mhm,
When you're talking to somebody, my neighbor on one side is from Guyana. And we were talking one day and he talked about this food. I can't remember the name of it, but it was a recipe his mom would make and he really loved it. And of course, he can't really get it here.
mhm,
And I thought, well, I know somebody who's Guyanese that actually caters and does stuff, and I'll bet she knows how to make this.
mhm,
And he'd
mhm,
been sick for a while.
mhm,
So I got her to make this dish and I took it over to him. And he was speechless.
mhm,
I can't believe you did that. And
mhm,
it was like the look on his face was so great. But I only knew that because I had enough conversations with him to have a little bit of understanding of where he came from and what things he loved. And,
yeah.
that gave me the opportunity to do
Mhm,
this thing, which for
mhm,
me was nothing. Somebody else cooked it. I just picked it up and brought it over, right? But it was, we can do those kindnesses
yeah.
if we take the time to get to know the people around us.
I can't believe how quickly the time's going.
I
But
know.
one of the other things, what it makes me think about is this whole thing about cultural sensitivity.
Mhm.
I wonder if it's not doing as much harm as is good. Because what it does, for me, I don't know about anybody else, but it almost makes me afraid to
Yep.
speak to people of another culture, or of an indigenous race, because I don't want to be culturally insensitive. However, how do we learn about each other if we can't truly be ourselves and say, forgive me, I don't know these things, but I would love to hear about, what you're doing, where you live, what field of work you're in, or whatever, right? Without
Yeah.
having to worry about being culturally insensitive. So
But you know
yeah,
what? We're culturally insensitive because white people are telling each other you got to be careful what you say, and it's
yeah,
not true.
yeah,
Um, it's coming to that place of sitting down with somebody and knowing that you might say it wrong, but if you're sitting having a conversation with somebody with a curiosity to know them,
yeah,
they are going to receive you. And if
yeah,
you make a mistake, it's going to just be water under the bridge. It isn't going to hold weight because
exactly.
they know that you don't know.
Hmm.
And if they're strong enough, they might say, we wouldn't look at it that way or whatever. But
Yeah,
I think we have to be willing to make the mistakes
I think
if
so
we
too.
want to come together. My eldest daughter, when she was in town, was at the park with her grandson playing, and he was playing with this little girl, and so she started talking to the mom, and the mom was like, "Wow, I can't believe you're talking to me," because she was in a full job, right? And it's like, and she's like, why wouldn't I? Our kids are playing. Why wouldn't I? And she said, most white people won't,
Yeah.
won't approach me. And, we're making an assumption because of the way she's dressed that she
Yeah.
isn't going to be receptive to us. But that's absolutely not true. And so
Yeah.
we have to put ourselves out there because
I think so. I think a lot of, I don't know. I don't know. That's a judgment. So I'll just keep it to myself.
well, we all have them, right?
We do.
We do. And, it just is what it is. We're getting down to the end. Final thoughts moving out of this
I think
conversation.
the final thought for me is that we know that we are one. We know that there is no good, there's no bad. We embrace the shadow and the light. And therefore, history needs to be looked at the same way.
I agree completely. Show me somebody who hasn't made a mistake, and I'll show you somebody who's lying to you.
Yeah.
Right? Because I agree. I think we need to develop our curiosity, expand our own comfort within our own skin,
Mhm.
so that we can stand with others without feeling like we have to defend our beingness because we're so afraid of being seen. We're filled with shame, doubt, or whatever's going on for us. And I think that as we become more honest with ourselves, with our biases and, our attributes, and just go, you know what? I make mistakes. I'm human. And I believe that is true of all 8 billion of us. I can't think of a single person who's never made a mistake. So I think we have to be more compassionate with ourselves, more compassionate with others, and also have a desire to learn about others.
Mm-hmm.
Have a
Absolutely.
conversation.
And be present. Be here now.
Listen to what the person is saying. We got 2 of these, one of these. Fermez la bouche. That's my attempt at French. Close your mouth. But I think we do. We talk more
Yeah.
than we listen. And I think we noticed that a couple times last week at convention when somebody would say something and then the response was something totally different. It's like
Mhm.
that wasn't heard. The initial conversation wasn't heard. And
Yeah.
I think we could do better.
We
could
get in
put
the way of ourselves, right?
Yeah. Yes, absolutely. And just, just learn to love ourselves as we are, where we are. We're all making mistakes. We're all doing dumb things. And we all have some very unique and special gifts that we're bringing into life right now. And we need to share those. And so,
And on that note,
and on that note,
we have a
well,
wonderful guest next week.
oh, Summer Osborne. Oh my goodness.
She's
You are
amazing.
treat.
In for a treat. Her music, her philosophy, who she is, and how she bees.
Oh.
So be sure to watch next week.
Watch next week. Bring your friends, your family, your neighbors, your enemies, anybody. Just bring them all in because it's going to be a great show. Thank you, Cheryl. I love doing this with you. And for everybody who watches, we love you. We appreciate you. And we know that our world is really, truly a safe place to be, filled with love and kindness. And we're going to excavate that from within ourselves.
Yes,
You're watching Spirit Cafe. See you next time on the New Thought Media Network. Like, share, and subscribe. Bye, honey.
On behalf of everyone at New Thought Media Network, thank you for being a member of our virtual family. Your financial contributions help share the New Thought message with people from around the world. Please visit and contribute at www.ntmedia.org/donate. New Thought Media Network. Come be you. And please like, share, and subscribe. Until next time, peace and blessings.